It was a warm Friday afternoon on the corner of Pine Street in Riverton, just outside the bustling city center. Officer Ryan Mercer sat in his patrol car, casually sipping the last of his lukewarm coffee. Ryan was known among his peers for his arrogance and quick temper, often crossing the line under the guise of doing his job. He saw himself as the ultimate authority, a badge granting him unchecked power. Today, that arrogance would lead to an encounter he'd regret for the rest of his life. Across the street, a sharp-dressed black man stepped out of a cafe. His name was Elijah Carter, a poised and confident individual who had recently returned to Riverton after years of working in another city. But this was no ordinary homecoming. Elijah had just been appointed captain of the Riverton Police Department. The assignment was a chance to reconnect with his roots and bring much-needed reform to the precinct. Unbeknownst to Officer Mercer, Elijah's first challenge would come sooner than expected. Elijah crossed the street, his polished shoes clicking on the pavement. His stride was purposeful, but relaxed, as he headed toward a nearby parking garage. Ryan Mercer, who had been idly scanning the street, noticed Elijah and felt an immediate surge of disdain. There was nothing inherently suspicious about Elijah, but in Ryan's mind, a confident black man in a suit walking through Riverton was reason enough to intervene. Tossing his coffee into the cup holder, Ryan slammed his car door shut and strode toward Elijah, his expression hard and accusatory. "Hey, you," Ryan barked, stepping directly into Elijah's path. "What are you doing around here?" Elijah stopped, surprised but composed. "Good afternoon, officer," he said, his voice calm. "I'm on my way to a meeting." Ryan wasn't interested in pleasantries. He took a step closer, his hand resting on the holster of his sidearm. "A meeting, huh? You look like you're up to no good," he sneered. "Got any ID?" Without hesitation, Elijah reached into his jacket, moving deliberately to avoid any sudden movements. "Of course, officer," he said, keeping his tone measured. "I'd be happy to show you my ID." But before Elijah could retrieve his wallet, Ryan's temper flared. "You think you're better than me?" he snapped, suddenly grabbing Elijah's arm. Without warning, Ryan swung his fist, punching Elijah square in the face. The force of the blow caused Elijah to stumble back, his hand instinctively reaching for his cheek. The few bystanders who witnessed the scene froze in shock. The air was thick with disbelief as Ryan stood over Elijah, smirking. "Maybe now you'll learn some respect," Ryan said, his tone dripping with smugness. But Elijah didn't stay down for long. Straightening himself, he brushed off his suit and fixed Ryan with a steely gaze. His calm demeanor was gone, replaced by an unmistakable aura of authority. "You just made a big mistake, officer," Elijah said firmly. Ryan rolled his eyes, his smirk widening. "Oh yeah? And what mistake is that?" Elijah stepped closer, his voice low but commanding. "I'm Captain Elijah Carter, your new commanding officer." For a moment Ryan's expression was frozen in disbelief. Then, as the weight of Elijah's words sank in, his face turned pale. What? Ryan stammered, his bravado evaporating. You're the captain?" "That's right," Elijah said, holding his ground. "And you just assaulted a superior officer." Elijah pulled out his phone and dialed a number, his movements deliberate and calm. "This is Captain Carter," he said into the receiver. "I need a squad down at Pine Street and 3rd Avenue. An officer has assaulted me, and I'll be pressing charges." Ryan's confidence crumbled. His eyes darted to the small crowd of onlookers, some of whom were recording the incident on their phones. He realized with growing dread that this wasn't just a departmental matter, this was a public spectacle, and his career was hanging by a thread. Within minutes, the sound of sirens pierced the tense atmosphere. 2 squad cars arrived, and out stepped a group of officers. Among them was Sergeant Linda Parker, a seasoned officer known for her fairness and no-nonsense approach. "Captain Carter," Linda said, addressing Elijah with a nod of respect. "What's going on here?" Elijah explained the situation calmly. "Officer Mercer assaulted me without provocation," he said, his voice steady. "I'm pressing charges." Linda's jaw tightened as she turned to Ryan. "Mercer, is this true?" she asked sharply. Ryan fumbled for words, his usual bravado replaced by a trembling voice. I didn't know he was the captain," he blurted out. "It doesn't matter who he is," Linda replied coldly. "You assaulted a civilian, let alone your commanding officer. Officers, cuff him." 2 officers stepped forward, their expressions somber as they placed handcuffs on Ryan. The metallic click of the cuffs seemed to echo through the street, a stark contrast to the smug confidence Ryan had exuded just minutes earlier. The footage of Officer Ryan Mercer's unprovoked assault on Captain Elijah Carter spread across social media like wildfire. Within hours, What Justice for Captain Carter and Mouchrouch accountability in Riverton began trending on platforms nationwide. Local news outlets picked up the story, and it quickly became a focal point for discussions on police misconduct and systemic reform. In Riverton, the public response was immediate and overwhelming. Protesters gathered outside the police station, holding signs that read, "Accountability now," and "No badge above the law." Community leaders, clergy members, and activists called for swift action, demanding not only Mercer's dismissal but also a comprehensive review of the police department's practices. Elijah, however, was not content to let public pressure dictate his next steps. He knew that real change required more than just firing one officer. At a press conference held at City Hall, Elijah addressed the media, his voice calm but resolute. "What happened on Pine Street is a symptom of a deeper problem," he began. "This is not just about one officer's actions. It's about a culture that allows misconduct to go unchecked. As captain, I take full responsibility for ensuring that this department lives up to the standards of justice and integrity it is meant to uphold. And I promise you, we will not let this moment pass without meaningful change." Elijah's transparency struck a chord with the public. He acknowledged the hurt and mistrust that had grown between the police department and the community and emphasized his commitment to rebuilding those bonds. His speech was met with applause, but Elijah knew that words alone would not be enough. It was time for action. In the weeks following the incident, Elijah spearheaded an ambitious reform agenda. He began by overhauling the department's training programs, focusing on de-escalation tactics, implicit bias, and ethical decision-making. Every officer, from rookies to veterans, was required to participate, with no exceptions. Elijah also implemented a new accountability system. A civilian oversight board was established, composed of community members who would review complaints against officers and ensure transparency in disciplinary actions. This move was met with resistance from some within the department, but Elijah stood firm. "Accountability is not a punishment," he told his officers during a department-wide meeting. "It's a safeguard that ensures we are living up to our mission. If we can't hold ourselves accountable, we have no right to ask for the community's trust." Elijah didn't stop there. He introduced initiatives to bridge the gap between the police and the community, such as town hall meetings, ride-alongs for civilians, and partnerships with local organizations focused on youth development and mental health services. Officers were encouraged to engage with the neighborhoods they served, not as enforcers but as allies. The impact of these changes was immediate. Complaints of misconduct dropped, and public confidence in the department began to slowly recover. Elijah's leadership set a new standard for policing in Riverton, one rooted in respect, empathy, and a shared commitment to justice. Months later, Elijah stood before a packed auditorium filled with officers, community leaders, and residents. His journey to the moment had been marked by challenges, but he stood tall, ready to lead by example. "This department is not just about enforcing the law," Elijah began, his voice strong and resolute. "It's about upholding justice, earning trust, and protecting the dignity of every person we serve." What happened on Pine Street was a failure, but it was also a turning point. "From now on, we will do better, together." The crowd erupted into applause, and Elijah felt a renewed sense of purpose. His return to Riverton had been anything but easy, but he had faced adversity head-on, proving that true leadership requires courage, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to justice. And as Elijah left the stage, he knew his work was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, Riverton had hope.